All right, guys, today we're doing a card pull from some of the cameras I have over in Pennsylvania on public land. My family has had a hunting camp up in the Allegheny National Forest this was hunting season number 67, I want to say, up there. I had 3 renders and a lift 2 in our yard at the camp out for the majority of the season. One of the renders in the lift 2 I didn't get put up till November, but we'll just dive right in. We'll start going through these. The first camera that I put up was the bottom scrape. On this camera, I've had a tree stand there for probably going on 10 plus years. It's always a solid spot. It's down in a real big bottom. There's a couple scrapes down right on a transition area between where the swampy bottom ends and then the bigger hardwood bottom begins, along with a power line that runs along the side of it. So I hung this up in September, and this is first picture I got on it, just 2 giant long beards. Hoping they stick around for the springtime, make it through the winter. I did skim through these and deleted, a lot of the pictures with foxes or raccoons or opossums running by. But after that, next picture we got, hard to tell, but if you look on the left-hand side here, you can see a bear walking away. Up there we have a lot of bears. Any bears you see on the news in western Pennsylvania, eastern Ohio, in the city getting relocated, they get dumped right up by our camp. All right, and then October 17th, got this porcupine coming by. Then it wasn't until October 22nd that we got our first buck on this camera. Typically this spot we don't get a lot early in the year. You gotta wait till scrape week or getting close to scrape week, and then the bucks start coming down off of the hills, off the mountains, and start hitting this scrape at night, and then as you'll see, eventually start hitting it during the day. So there he is again, solid. I think he's a 9-pointer, just sitting there working that scrape. Then we got a doe on the 23rd, and here's the big boy. October 24th, this showed up at 9:27 in the evening. This is for up there, this is a pretty exceptional buck. I mean, anywhere across the Midwest, most guys would be happy with a deer of that caliber. And the very next night, here comes that 9-point coming by again to hit the scrape. October 27th, here he is again, just cruising through, working the scrape. Next morning, once the sun comes up, we got a doe that comes by. And here we go, November 2nd. Here's a different 9-point. Comes by and works scrape. 7:13 in the morning. And then November 4th here. So this is when I was up here hunting. November 4th here, so you can see the temperature, 66 degrees, hit almost 70 that day. 3:36 in the afternoon, I was up on top of the mountain with my grandfather hanging one of our other cameras, and I looked, and this is what came across my ScoutTech app. So that day I think I saw 1 spike in the morning, and that was it, so I wasn't too hopeful for the afternoon. Turns out I should have been there. Here we are November 4th at 10:30 in the evening. Here's that smaller 9-point coming by. 15 minutes later, here comes, looks like an 8-point, ears down, ready to come in and whoop some butt. Another doe running past in the background. A couple minutes later, here comes one of the other bucks at Mach 1 coming by, chasing that doe. There he is again, coming back through. So, this picture here, November 6th. So you're not allowed to hunt Sundays in Pennsylvania. So I left Saturday night, went back to Ohio to go hunt Ohio that Sunday, 2:03 in the afternoon, 60 yards from my stand. There's one of the nice 8-points daylighting, hitting the scrape as I am 3 hours away in a state that I'm allowed to hunt that day. Maybe someday Pennsylvania will actually allow Sunday hunting. That'd be nice instead of having 3 Sundays a year to hunt. There he is, just nice and pretty working that scrape well within bow range of my stand. Very next day, November 7th, here's a flock of turkeys that comes by, and then it died till November 10th. Had a doe come by. November 11th, there's one of the 8 or 9 points cruising by just out of range. November 13th, there's another one again. November 15th, the flock of turkeys again. November 19th, looks like a decent long beard. Not really too long of a beard, but he's got some spikes on him, that's for sure. There's the rest of the flock coming through. November 21st, there's a doe, another doe. 23rd, there's another doe. November 30th, here's a tom. December 3rd, now we're in full swing of gun season. Here's a doe. There's a fox on December 3rd. Another doe on the 5th. And that's been it on that camera ever since bear season, which starts the Saturday before Thanksgiving. My camera is pretty much just, they died. Not much action at all on them. You do get a lot of pressure, 3 weeks in a row, a lot of guys in the woods with high-powered rifles, so deer tend to disappear at that point. But that's public land for you. The next camera we have up there, I call this one the saddle scrape. I hung this the same time that I hung that camera in the bottoms. So this is a completely new spot to me. There's a couple ag fields in and around the National Forest land, and I just was speed scouting one day right off a parking lot on a saddle above a private ag field. Kind of went a different direction than most guys went. There's a line for in between private and public there, and lo and behold, I found this. So this was a 3rd week of September, I want to say, and this scrape was already open. There was rubs all over the place, a lot of buck sign in general. So the actual saddle itself is an old select cut, super thick, super nasty, tons of tracks and trails through there. So just overall a pretty good area that kind of gets overlooked because it's close to a parking lot. I set this camera up 9:17 at like 8 in the morning. Here we are 7:59 in the evening. We already have a buck hitting the scrape. And then as the evening progresses, that batcher group comes in, kind of works the scrape there. Very next morning, we have a buck daylighting already, hitting that scrape. I mean, it's September 18th, and look at how big that thing is already. And then after that, they all disappeared, so I take it they all shifted, and we didn't get anything with a rack for almost a month. Here we are, October 16th at 6:47 in the morning. Got a buck coming in, working the scrape, opening it back up. Same morning, we got another buck coming in the daylight. And this is, keep in mind, this is when season's open up there. Public land, real close to a parking lot. Here he is cruising through in the daylight. Here he comes back down through. Here he is again, standing in the scrape. Just putting on a show. So 10:19 at 6:39 p.m., we had a group of does come down through. And then 10:20, the very next day, we had quite possibly the biggest bear I've ever seen up there come cruising through. He is just a mammoth. The head on that thing is humongous. That's a couple 100-pound black bear there. Love to wrap my tag around him, but you get a mile or two back in, how are you going to get him out? So October 23rd, 7:32 in the morning, got a couple transition photos here of a buck coming in, working a scrape. Next day, October 24th, got a little spike or button buck coming in. Same day, later on in the evening, had another buck coming in, working that scrape, just a little spike. Next morning, we had one of those wider, I think it's a 6 or an 8. Not a very old deer, but he came in. Here he is again, the very next evening, coming in, working the scrape. Same evening, here's a different buck coming in, working that scrape. There he goes. A couple days later, 10:29, another buck coming in, working that scrape. This series here is cool. So 10:24 in the evening, buck comes and works the scrape. Then here we are, 11:35 in the evening. We have this bigger buck who's much wider, coming in, actually standing on his back legs, working that licking branch. 11:2, here's another buck cruising through. 11:3, here's another wider one coming down through. And then a couple hours later, almost midnight on November 3rd, here comes something sprinting by. November 5th comes another buck. As you can see, those first 7 days of November up there, it was super warm. Daytime highs in the 70s, lows down in the 40s and 50s. So there still was some daylight activity, but it seemed like the majority of it was at night. Very next morning, here comes something at 7:43 in the morning. 7:46, it's that same younger 6 or 8 point there. November 7th, 9:18 in the evening, here comes another 8 point. Again, not a very old deer. And then November 8th, as you can see, it finally starts to cool down. Here we have our first buck coming through in the daylight. November 10th, 9:21 in the morning, here comes a little 8 point cruising through. November 12th, another smaller buck coming through. Later on that evening, here's another smaller 8 point. November 14th, right at last light, here comes a buck cruising through. November 18th is when the cold front moved in. Got dumped on with snow up there. Here we are, 6:47 in the morning, and it's only 22 degrees. A couple does working through. Very next day, 8:55 in the morning, here comes a buck cruising through. Another button buck that same day. Very next evening, here comes a buck cruising through at a pretty brisk pace, chasing something. November 22nd, here comes a spike. 25th, here's a 4. Another doe. Couple does actually. There's one back on the logging road there. Another little 6 or an 8 point there. Another button buck. Spike. December 11th, 5:06 in the evening, so right about shooting hours there. December 12th, another one coming by, and that's it. So same thing, it's public land. As you can see, once the gun season started rolling around, all the bucks disappeared. All right, so the next camera, this camera is up on a bench right above the top of the hill. I call this one Pabst Rock because there's a big rock there that he has sat on for the past 67 years and killed plenty of deer off of. There's a logging road that runs in front of it with a pretty nice scrape, just all around a good area. Nice travel corridor there. It's right on the edge of bedding. They select cut that side of the hill probably 10 years ago. The other side, they're starting to select cut now, so it's going to get even thicker. Overall, just a good area to hunt at, hang a camera at. Anyone that hunts hill country always, everyone always knows if you want to find some of the bigger ones, you got to get up on those upper thirds. So this one I did not get hung until November 4th. So there's my grandfather. Here we are setting the camera up. And then nothing till November 7th. It's hard to tell, but right above the temperature here where it says 57 degrees, you can see a couple tines sticking up from a buck running by. Then November 7th here, this picture here, when it originally came in, I couldn't, didn't really tell what was in it. So I didn't really look at it until lately. I was kind of thumbing through pictures and I noticed this over here, way over here in the brush. Nice buck cruising that logging road there. I'd assume he was following a doe because just before this I had a picture of a doe that came sprinting by. So I take it that the trigger delay is what caused him to trigger the camera the whole way over here. A couple hours later, here comes a smaller buck. Next day, here's one of the smaller 8 points checking out that scrape. Very next day, same thing. I couldn't tell really what was in this picture till the HDs came in. Looks like a doe or something cruising way up there. Might be a buck actually, because up kind of where he's standing at, there's another scrape up there. There's one at the base of the top of the hill, and then there's 2 up on top. So just a nice scrape line that runs north and south on this hill. November 10th, got a little 4 point running by. November 11th, got some buck running by at 2 in the morning. November 14th here, same thing. Got a buck over here, perfectly in line with the tree. It's public land, so I can't cut it. Same thing. Just before this, I got pictures of a doe that came sprinting by, so I take it he was dogging her. Just from the looks of it, though, looks like it's a bright yellow rack there. And then here comes the snow. So we're up in the snow belt there. We get absolutely dumped on by anything that comes off Lake Erie up there. So pretty cool picture of this little 8 point. He must have hit his head off a couple branches because he got a pile of snow sitting right at the top of his head in between his antlers. 11:18, here comes another deer through. This one is actually a pretty nice buck. You could tell just by the frame on this guy, he's a pretty nice one. There he is 2 minutes later, ducking back up the hill to go check the next scrape. And then November 21st here, we got a doe sprinting by. A couple minutes later, there's the spike. And here we go, opening day gun season. So grandfather and I sat on the rock there. We saw, I think, 7 or 8 deer, bunch of doe, and a little spike that came running by. So nothing to write home about there. A couple days later, December 1st, looks like a fawn trying to feed off of mama. December 2nd, another doe moving through, and that's it. It's been dead ever since. All right, last camera here. So when I was there in November, I pulled in the first night and there was 3 does standing down in the yard staring at me. So I decided to hang a camera down there, and this is what I found. Hung the camera November 4th at 6:57. We are 11:52, some does moving through. Another doe coming up and sniffing the camera. Here she is, still sniffing the camera, and then she decides she doesn't like that. Some more does. And this is all the same night that I set it up. Just sitting there munching on the grass. Here comes the doe again. And this is where it gets interesting. So, same evening. So now we're into November 5th, 3:12 in the morning. Here comes a doe sprinting by. And just to preface this camera is about 100 yards from the front door of our camp. And it's only about 300 yards from the bottom scrape camera across the creek. Here we go, one of the 9 points bumping does around in the yard of my camp. Pretty deer there. Another doe and a fawn there. Some more does. And I walked past probably about a half hour after this, walking up the little edge here to go across the creek. And I wonder I didn't see anything that day because they all came across the creek and walked through the yard of camp at 7:30 in the morning. November 6th here, right at midnight. So about 6-7 hours after I left, here comes a buck cruising through. Same evening, here's that big tall 8 point cruising through looking for does in the yard of my camp. And here he is again that same evening, just cruising through, scent checking. And that's it for Pennsylvania. So I want to get a couple more cameras up there next year to kind of monitor the area a little better. I mean, I'm only working with, a couple 100-acre mountain there. There's millions upon millions of acres of state forest land, state game lands, national forest land up there. So I'd like to kind of spread out a little bit, just to see what's around, see maybe if I can get back in a little deeper, maybe get into some of the bigger deer. So hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for next week. Jace is going to be doing the hill country set from Ohio, breaking down all the cameras we had down there and breaking down the set where we had the camera at where he shot his buck on Halloween. So if you still get a tag in your pocket like I do, don't worry, don't freak out. Still got plenty of season left.